They say the wind never stops on this island, where the sea claws at the cliffs and the earth still bears the monster's footprints. But it's not the wind that haunts you, it's what the wind remembers. It slips beneath your coat, finds your scars, and whispers the names you buried, dragging the weight of the past into your present. This land doesn't forget. Not footsteps, not screams, not the taste of blood on stone. I once believed the curse began with me, but that was pride, talking. The truth is, it began long before. Ask the island, ask the stone, ask the footprints older than sin. The letter arrived a month before the 5-year mark. If Rowena Blackthorne does not return to Blackridge Manor and reside there for a continuous 6 months, the property shall be surrendered to Edward Blackthorne, cousin and sole surviving collateral line. No inheritance, no contents, no appeal. The solicitor said the clause was added in my mother's hand, scrawled on a torn page from the family Bible. A single word beneath the signature was, "Forgive." I told myself I came back for the house, what was owed to me, the orchard I played in, and the library where my mother whispered stories when the wind was too loud. But that wasn't the truth. I came back for him, not because I forgave him, because I couldn't forget him. And some nights, I still dreamt of the footprints and woke with soil on my feet. They said the wind never stopped in Glenvale. It howled now like a warning, rattling the wooden cartwheels as we crested the rise. The horses shied before the manor came into view, as if they knew better than to carry a Blackthorn home. My boots sank deep into the mud, caked with peat and moss, every step heavier than the last. The sky above was the color of ash. Rain threatened but didn't fall, yet. Behind me, the hired driver crossed himself and mumbled something in Gaelic before turning the cart around. No one stayed past the stone boundary. I stopped briefly at the gate. Blackridge House loomed across the moor, half swallowed by ivy, windows blank as dead eyes. One chimney still breathed smoke, curling faintly into the slate-colored sky, a thin trail, like the house exhaled only under protest. And then I saw him. A figure stood farther down the slope, coat flapping, hands at his sides, still as stone, watching. He didn't wave, didn't move, but I knew the way he held himself, the set of his shoulders, the storm-heavy stillness. It was as if his gaze bore into me a constant, unrelenting scrutiny. Devereux McInnes. He hadn't moved, but the sight of him knocked the breath from my chest. For a moment, I felt every second of the 5 years I'd spent trying to forget him. I didn't come for him, not really. That's what I told myself. But standing there, heart hammering, boots slick with peat, I realized I'd never truly left him behind. I turned quickly, pretending not to see him, pretending it didn't matter, but the ache in my chest said otherwise. He was the last person I'd hoped to avoid, and the first my bones remembered. They said the house was cursed, held the memories of all who had lived and died within its walls, and whispered their secrets in the dead of night. But I'd left pieces of myself in it, and perhaps in him. I should have turned back. The wind said so, the stone said so, but I was already opening the door. The door groaned under my hand. Dust curled in the lamplight, catching in the air like ash. The scent hit me, sharp with stone and rot, softened by the brittle sweetness of dried lavender. The house remembered me, and it. Exactly as I remembered. Worse, maybe. The same crooked portrait of my grandfather hung above the hearth, his painted eyes yellowing with age, still judging. As a child, I'd been terrified of him. As a woman, I only feared what he might have known and never spoken. The grand staircase loomed to the left, its banister slick with cold. I ran my hand along it once to prove I still could. The hall narrowed like a throat. Shadows thickened at the edges, and the silence pressed down like a second skin. A broken tile still marked the spot where my uncle had fallen drunk the night my mother died. I'd scrubbed her blood from the floor. No one had thanked me. To the right, the drawing room, empty now. Once my father had played the cello there. He said the music kept the ghosts quiet. He was wrong. The solicitor had left the keys on the mantel, wrapped in a brittle envelope. No note, no welcome. Just the will, creased and thin from damp. To Rowena Blackthorne, sole surviving blood, I leave the estate. For good or ill. Even the parchment had curled in protest. I sat heavily on the edge of the dusty chaise, holding the envelope as if it might explode. I felt no joy, no triumph, only the slow, steady hum of dread and something else, something darker and more ominous. The house hadn't forgotten me, and neither had whatever still lived inside it, a presence that seemed to watch and wait, its intentions unknown. Rain laced the window. I lit no fire. I wanted the cold. I wanted it to bite. The bedroom smelled of mothballs and memory. I hadn't set foot here in nearly 5 years, but everything remained as though I'd never left. The faded quilt, the cracked mirror, the outline of the crucifix where my mother had once hung it. I stood there, soaked and shivering, more ghost than guest. My fingers moved involuntarily, lifting the mattress as I had many years ago. Dust puffed up, clinging to my skin. The tin box waited in the same hollow beneath the bed frame, untouched, but not unremembered. Still there, still locked. But the latch gave easily. Inside, a rosary with beads worn smooth from prayer, hers. A lock of hair bound in velvet thread, the color faded but familiar, mine. And the ring. That damned ring. Silver. Inlaid with a single stone. We'd been too young to speak of forever, but we had. I'd worn it for a week. Then I'd buried it in the orchard and promised never to touch it again. But I did, and here it was. My hands trembled as I held it up. The metal was ice cold, as though it had been waiting to accuse me. A voice rose in my throat. Not a scream, not a sob. Something smaller, rougher. I closed the box. A thump below. My breath caught in my throat. I stilled. Then, a breath. Not mine. I waited in the dark, every hair on my body lifting. Then silence. And beneath that silence, the low, steady creak of a floorboard. I didn't move. The box sat in my lap like a heartbeat. When I finally looked up, the mirror was fogged, though the room was ice. Something had exhaled behind me. I was not alone. I didn't sleep that night. The mirror stayed fogged long after I'd wiped it. The sound of the floorboard, too deliberate to be settling, echoed like a pulse under the floor. And the box with the ring sat on the windowsill, catching the moonlight in a way I could no longer stand to look at. By morning the house was silent, but I wasn't. I needed noise. I needed something louder than memory, sharper than breath. So I walked. I told myself I was going to speak to the solicitor again, to ask why the will had been so specific. But I went to the tavern instead because I wanted to feel hated. I wanted to be seen. If Devereux were going to pretend I didn't exist, I'd force the entire town to remember I did. The tavern stilled as I entered. No one stood. No one spoke. Chairs scraped quietly. Mugs stilled mid-air. The fire crackled as if reacting to my presence. The room smelled of smoke, ale, and old resentment. Blackthorn. Old Mrs. McCrae spat into her cup, the sound deliberate. A child peeked from behind her shawl before being yanked back. Someone near the hearth whispered, "Just like her mother. Walks like her, too." I moved through the room like a ghost returned to its death scene. "She's got her father's eyes," another voice murmured. "Cold as the loch." I kept my chin up, my coat dripping rain and mud on my hem. Their words didn't sting, not anymore, but they confirmed it. Nothing here had changed, not truly. I stepped up to the bar. Whiskey, I said flatly. The barkeeper didn't speak. He just set a glass roughly down on the counter. A voice behind me, low, rough, familiar. She'll take it neat, always did. The bartender poured. My fingers trembled as I wrapped them around the glass. Before I could think, I turned. Slowly. Devereaux McInnes leaned against the corner beam, his arms folded, eyes storm-dark and unreadable. He hadn't changed much. The beard was new. The anger wasn't. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said. "Likewise." A pause, a beat too long. He nodded toward the drink. "Still chasing ghosts?" "Still letting them catch me." Mrs. McCrae gave a sharp sniff. "You should have stayed dead, girl. Him too." Devereaux's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. I downed the whiskey in one go, the burn clean and brutal. "Good," I said, turning to face them all. "Let the curse knock before it enters. But don't be surprised when it walks straight through the door." I left the tavern not long after. Devereaux didn't follow me. No one did. But the heat in my cheeks burned as if every whispered word still clung to my coat. I walked without knowing why, but I couldn't go back to the house yet. Not with the ring still on the windowsill or his voice echoing in my head. So I walked, into the mist, into memory. By dusk, I had walked to the mooring stone, boots squelching through sodden earth. Mist clung low to the ground, curling around my ankles like curious fingers. The sky had gone slate gray, and the loch whispered in the distance, its voice low and slow, a language I used to pretend I understood. Here, the wind dropped, like breath held. It always did. Even as a child, I'd felt the way. The land seemed to hush itself in this hollow. The mooring stone stood crooked, tall as a man, worn smooth by weather and time. Strange markings coiled across its face, some old, some older. No one alive could read them. They said the stone moored the souls of those lost to the loch, that if you pressed your palm flat to the center, it would show you your death. I shouldn't have touched it, but I did, standing close enough to feel its chill. The grass around it was flattened in a perfect ring. Some said that it was natural. Others swore it was from the feet of spirits who circled it at night, whispering bargains. My mother once caught me playing here and slapped me so hard I couldn't hear out of one ear for a day. She never explained why, but nearby, just beyond the gorse and lichen, lie the footprints. They looked almost too perfect, three-toed impressions gouged into black stone, as if something colossal had stepped there only moments ago and vanished into mist. The indentations were smooth, deep, and lined with rainwater. I'd once heard a geologist call them prehistoric. 10 million years, he said. But even then, he'd refused to step inside them. I had as a girl. I'd slipped from the house on a dare and stood in the largest print, my arms out like wings, trying to imagine what sort of creature had passed through this place. The air had gone so quiet around me that I'd heard my breath echo. My mother found me minutes later and dragged me back, trembling with a fear I hadn't understood then. She never spoke of it again. The villagers still don't speak of them, not aloud. The young ones call them the Devil's Steps. They make games of it, until one dares to go alone. The old ones say, "Step once, you'll see your death. Step twice, you'll walk into it." I stared at the prince now, a full-grown woman, and still I felt the same magnetic pull. I moved closer, the wind pressing at my back. My boot paused just above the edge of the largest mark. I didn't step in, but I wanted to. And I think maybe it wanted me to. The house whispered after dark. Not creaks, whispers. A hush too steady to be wood settling, too intentional to be wind. It came from behind the walls, from under the floorboards, from the staircase that sighed like lungs with every shift of the beams. Books lay in piles where no one had left them. A candle flickered on the writing desk, lit, though my matches were still cold in my pocket. The flame sputtered as I stepped closer, casting long, spidery shadows along the wall. And there, in the center of the desk, lay a page, old parchment, its corners singed, curling as if touched by fire. The ink was wrong, dark, but not black, crimson when it caught the candlelight, like blood that had dried just enough to flake. The words were written in my mother's hand. Entry 1. The Blackthorn girl has returned. The house will not hold. Not Rowena, not daughter, just the Blackthorn girl. As if that was all I'd ever been. The letters bled into the paper, softening at the edges as if trying to retreat. My mouth went dry. I had not seen her handwriting in 5 years. I spun, heart racing, expecting to find someone behind me. No one. The window stood wide open, though I knew I'd shut it. The curtains fluttered like wings, and rain streaked the glass in jagged strokes. Beyond, the night pulsed, dark and silent, and the lock breathed in the distance, slow and heavy as a sleeping god. My gaze returned to the page. A second line was forming, the ink etching itself onto the parchment before my eyes. She has opened the door. It is awake. The flame blew out, and the whispering began again, louder now, closer, beneath my feet, behind my name. The same hush I'd felt as a girl, when I spread my arms like wings and dared the stone to remember me. I was not alone. I had never been. Thank you for listening to Of Heather and Smoke at Timeless Tales by Anna. Did this story stir something inside you? A chill down your spine? A memory, half remembered? Or a question that refuses to fade? We'd love to hear what lingered with you most. Share it in the comments. Your thoughts mean more than you know. If this tale held you, you might be just as drawn to Shackled Sky, where Meg endures storm and sorrow aboard a convict ship to Australia. Or Codename Scarlet, where Elise distinguishes between love and danger in war-torn Paris. Our stories are all threads in the same tapestry, Gothic, romantic, and quietly defiant. So if one found you, others may too. Until next time, stay warm, stay watchful, and never ignore the whisper at your door.